All right. And welcome everyone to Religion Zero number 38. Um yeah. So threw me off there, Brooke.
Morning, Amos.
Morning. So today, well, first off, before we get into it, I'm joined by the panel, of course. We've got CONK and Brooke. How's it going, guys?
Wait, which one am I?
You're the CONK one, I think.
Am I CONK or Brooke?
I think you're the CONK, yes.
I think you're CONK. Yeah. How's it going, CONK?
There? Okay. Oh, man. It's been a doozy. We are in the single-digit temperatures for the last week, and we'll continue on into this week until about Friday or Saturday before it actually gets above 10. So it's been pretty brutal, which sucks, especially if you have a car where the heater doesn't always work and you have a driving job. So that's been fun. I've just been alternating feeling frozen and, well, actually, there's no thing. I've just always been frozen. That's been my whole week, being outside in a car with inconsistent heat. But yeah, that's about it. I do have good news. As of last night, somebody booked $1,000 worth of days at my Airbnb starting today. So that's cool.
Excellent.
So you get a quick little grand in there for literally cleaning my house for 2 hours. That's about it. And then I just let it go, that's $500 an hour, It's it's a good rate. It's a good rate of return. All righty. But yeah, that's about it. I'm just living the dream outside and trying not to get hypothermia.
I mean, you were recently a guest on a friend of the show. I don't know if you want to kind of maybe plug his stuff a little bit.
Oh, yeah. So some of you may know that, what was it? It was before Christmas for sure. We had an earlier episode of Religion Zero with my friend Stephen Green, and we kind of just did a deep dive into his spiritual journey and the conclusions he's made from that. He announced there that he was going to start his own podcast, and it's now officially happened a couple months later. It's called Soul and Tonic. I could probably pull up the link, or somebody can pull up the link and throw it in there. Yeah, I was his first guest, which was pretty sick. And we basically just did what he did, but for me on his show, kind of deep dived into my Batman origin story and the conclusions I've made from those. Good fun. Talked a lot about how to play the game as a Christian, where everything really is kind of a game at the end of the day, and God calls us to be shrewd and to play the game, but do it gently like a dove. Shrewd as a serpent, gentle as a dove, something like that. We talked a lot about that verse and how that applies to the Christian life. Good fun. I really liked it.
Yeah, I just posted the link in the chat if anybody wants to see that episode.
Cool. So, Brooke, how was your week?
Shit. It was complete shit. It was like nothing happened. We're still in lockdown out here. They were supposed to review the regulations not that long ago. So I really thought by about this week, they will kind of lift the things. I could get back to the gym and just get back to some kind of normalcy. But obviously that did not happen. They're not going to be reviewing this stuff until possibly as late as March. They're talking about us getting out of this thing by spring. I don't know when spring is out here. That could be April as far as we know. So yeah, I'm a little discouraged. Although I did have a very entertaining night last night. I was invited into a virtual Christian single event in the UK. As you can imagine, that's very entertaining, especially for men like us with rather progressive views. I was in there until about 12 o'clock last night. I basically took over the whole thing, and I represented us proudly. So I don't know, maybe some people from last night might be joining us today, which would always be fun. Beyond that, I'm just looking forward to the show today. I think this is a fantastic topic. Good on you, Amos, for choosing this. So We'll see how
Yeah.
it goes today.
I would like to
Yeah.
point out, though, that Brooke, my views are very degressive, not progressive. Thank you.
Oh,
I
yeah,
take
fair
offense
enough.
to the term progressive.
Deconstructive.
Yeah. Yeah, degenerate in the literal sense instead of regenerate, actual degenerate. That's what I prefer.
Regenerate views. Well, I got you beat there, Conk. It's colder here.
Yeah, but that's expected because you basically live in Canada. I don't. I'm in Central America. I should have choices.
It is currently where I am 17 degrees below zero
Ooh, healthy.
Sexy.
with a wind chill of 36 below zero.
Spicy.
That's sort of a nice breezy
At those
walk in the park.
temperatures, you can experience frostbite in 5 minutes.
So don't whip your dick out while you're outside. Is that what you're saying?
Don't whip anything out or leave
You
any
can't
skin
tell me
exposed.
what to do. You can't tell me.
Yeah.
Free balling.
Wind chill warning, not like an advisory. Because an advisory would be like, oh, okay, it's kind of cold. Freaking. Yeah, it's
Go
going to
outside
hit
and die kind of thing.
24 below zero sometime tonight.
Do you have the heat on?
I do.
I wouldn't. Screw it.
Yeah,
I have it on
I got my heat on right here, man. This jacket.
Yeah. No, I've got heat, and then of course me being in the middle floor, there's definitely heat like transferring between the neighbors. And
You're
such,
insulated.
So. Yeah. So yeah, it's freaking crazy, and I have to work in this today, so we'll see how that goes.
Healthy.
Sweet.
Yeah. But anyways, today's topic, and people are probably kind of getting the idea like, oh, we're going to finally have the talk about creation and evolution. But I think the way we kind of talked about it is we want to get into more like sort of the stories of creation.
Yeah. And if they're relevant, right?
Yeah. Not necessarily like, are we creationists or evolution? Like there's a that's kind of like a worn out topic for most people.
Yeah.
Like, you see Bill Nye versus, what was it, Kevin Ham or whatever his name was? That whole debate.
Oh, yeah, the big arc guy.
Yeah.
Right.
You get
I've
all these
seen that.
debates, and then you get, books, movies, and all this stuff about how it's like trying, or the whole debate about, teaching evolution in schools because evolution is just a theory and all this stuff. And anyways, we're not going to get too much into that, but more so like the relevance of creation stories in general.
What's the evolution part of the title then? Because that's what you described. I thought is exactly what we were going to get into. So,
yeah. Well, I mean, I think they're intertwined.
They're intertwined.
Right?
That's
where did human come from? Right.
Right. We're not just gonna like go straight into. All right, guys, is create. More so like the relevance of the creation story, not like whether or not it's like debating one or the other. If you get what I'm saying.
Okay, that's not what I was thinking for this show at all. But all right, cool. We'll make it work.
F it, we'll do it live.
Yeah, let's just go with this flow, man.
So we obviously understand like the Bible and the creation story.
Do we though?
Adam and Steve.
Yeah.
Oh, there's Adam
Bill
and
Lilith. Ted. The first
Adam and Lilith. Yeah.
Simon and Garfunkel.
Hall and Oates. That's the show for today.
Me. No, but like, because I remember in school, like the whole thing was the teacher would start talking about evolution, and me and my little young little Amos that didn't really know much better was starting to talk about creation, and then there was this whole sort of split in the class, like the kids who were like all about evolution and the kids who were all about creation and such. But I think what I kind of missed was realizing that there is a relevance for both, in the sense that, I mean, first off, actually, let's touch on this. Do you guys think the Genesis account of creation is literal?
Yes and no. And I
Okay.
think that's about as specific as you can get, right? Usually when people ask that question, they're asking about the 7-day theory. Is it 7 day or a billion days, right? Or a billion years? And I actually think that's the least fun part to talk about in creation story, right? That's literally like the first couple sentences, and people always take it that way. And that's when you get into the whole Ken Ham creation versus evolution stuff. But if we're talking about the creation story, I include the Garden of Eden in that, right? And the fall of man and all of those things, and then the first kids. Like, all of that is the creation story. It's not necessarily, what everyone focuses on, which is 7 days and then God made dust man, right? Or dirt man,
Worst superhero ever.
Yeah, dirt man. But yeah, I think obviously the 7 days, like, it's very unlikely, but who knows? Like, until we invent time travel, all we're going to do is just, have a circle jerk yelling at each other about how many days it actually was. But, I mean, there's no time machine. We're all just going to keep guessing. So I think that part's dumb. I like a lot more of the messaging behind it, right? Was there a literal Garden of Eden? What did that actually mean? Did we actually come from apes, or did we come from something else? Or what the hell do the two trees mean? That's one of my favorite things of all time to talk about, is those two. And so I think, like, literally, was there two people that got some kind of enlightenment for a tree and then got kicked out of something? Possibly. Talking about days is dumb. That's my theory.
I would echo pretty much what CONK is saying there, that I don't think it's the creation narrative is not necessarily something to be taken literally. I think it's trying to impart certain truths that many cultures have discussed about, the origin of man and so forth. So I would take it, as you said, kind of more metaphorical. I don't believe in a literal 6-day creation. And to be very honest, most of the Western world has not believed in a 6-day literal creation since we started discovering rock stratas and other things. And this is even well into like the early millennia. So this is not that I don't think many believers actually held to a literal 6-day creation. Yeah, there weren't actually a lot of creationists in the early church and the church fathers taking the whole story literally. And Western society as a whole, when we started digging with archaeology and other things, we saw those stratas. So it's not like Darwin came along and kind of threw that out. No, even before Darwin, Western science did not believe in a young Earth. There are some interesting arguments for a young Earth. I don't necessarily, I don't have an explanation for them. For instance, like the distance of the moon. The moon, I think, gets further and further away like every year. So they're saying if it was millions of years, technically, the Earth and the moon would have been one. It would have been so close they basically would have been joined together. And
there's science to back that the moon came from Earth.
Well, that's one of the things, but the timing of it being so close, it's kind of hard. And then why doesn't it have the spin of the Earth? Because objects in space would all kind of be spinning in the same. So I'm not versed on creationist theories. There are some that are interesting, and I'm kind of like, okay, that's kind of scratching my head. Others don't really care. It's not really that important.
Right.
But yeah, I think the Garden of Eden story, there are a lot of interpretations. I think it's trying to impart certain amounts of truth. And it really does come down to, what is the tree of life versus what is the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, and how you kind of view those things. Rollo in his book was kind of irritating me by constantly referring to it as the tree of knowledge. And it's not the tree of knowledge, it's the tree of knowledge of good and evil. And that was kind of pissing me off when he was reading his book. But he got that from the rabbis. He got that from the Talmud, who believed all knowledge came from the tree. And that's not what. No, that's not.
Yeah, he named the animals before he ate from the tree.
Correct.
So, like, how are you doing that without knowledge? right?
Yeah.
Exactly. So that's probably where we can kind of get into some fun stuff.
Well, according to that, isn't it like because if you look into what is it like so the story of the Tower of Babel, there's the
Mhm.
whole theory about how humans
Yeah,
were
they're
probably
similar.
yeah the whole thing with like humanity used to be like extremely smart, and the Tower of Babel kind of disrupted that. So
Mhm.
similarly, like Adam and Eve had to have been really really smart, but just didn't really have a distinguishing like view about good and evil like God did. That was the only thing they didn't really care about. But anyways, um,
Wait, are you saying Adam and Eve had a very specific IQ and skull shape?
oh man, yeah, they ate an
I went there.
apple, and then
Yeah.
and then like certain vitamins and stuff mess with their head. Um, but yeah, like the thing I see is I've actually had I think I've mentioned this. I had a pastor that kind of like had some really interesting views about sort of creation and the end times.
Mhm.
Like he called like how like the Jew the in the was it the Jewish no just the like the language that was used in Genesis, the original language was not really specific, and like the word for days was not really specific. It wasn't like a 24-hour day like we understand it, and or weeks, or um just all these different ways of interpreting the numbers, the 7 days, and or 6 days technically, and how maybe like just in the sequence of like evolution, like it all kind of like the story of creation and evolution are basically like on top of each other in terms of time frames. um
Mhm.
and then and then of course there's always just the funny part that I like is like, okay, so Adam and Eve, so how did they populate the entire planet without like no one else? So they had
Yeah.
Cain and Abel, and that was it.
Yeah. Yeah, and I mean another part that a lot of people pick on there that's interesting is talking about when Cain kills Abel and it says he's feared other people are going to judge him. What other people, right? That's always a common question I've heard of, like some weird holes, plot holes, I guess, in the creation story, and lots
Plot
of
holes.
different weird theories and explanations. And that's when you
They've
get into
got
the
plot
weird
armor.
Lilith, other civilization stuff, right? Because at the time it was just like the four humans that were alive, and then Cain talks about being, well, I think, scared of being judged from other people in the land. But who are those other people? And and going back to what you're talking about, did Adam and Eve literally create everything? Does that, or like the beginning of all humans? Does that mean there was incest? Does that mean, like, you know what I mean? There's a lot of weird things about how the human actually spread to such numbers we have now. I think there's certainly weird theories for those, how those work out.
Maybe we were all just on one giant turtle. Have you guys known about that theory, that creation myth?
Actually, that's fact. Thank you very much. We've got enough proof. We're on a turtle.
Yeah, yeah. I remember when I was first like really questioning a lot of this, and I had a teacher that said, God created the microorganism. And then here we are, and then I got really pissed. I was like, but the Bible doesn't say God created the microorganism. And
That's
but
what
now I
doesn't tell
look
me how to file my taxes.
but now I look back at it and go, okay, yeah, it's so you think that the story maybe had like a greater meaning than just actually trying to explain creation?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's not actually supposed to be describing, a literal creation in that sense. The caveat that I have is, Jesus Christ did reference Adam. And the New Testament would be obviously the words of Christ and so forth would have more significance. So there seems to be a literal Adam And, even Paul will go back in the New Testament and say there was an Eve. Now, genetically speaking, we do talk about a genetic Adam and a genetic Eve kind of being, the precursors to humanity. So that's not so far a stretch. There's an issue with the dating because Adam occurred apparently about a couple of million years before the genetic Eve. So there is some inconsistencies in that regard. But the story, it's spiritual. These are spiritual aspects that are trying to be conveyed in the narrative. This is not a scientific textbook at the end of the day.
Because really the modern day creationist sort of ideas didn't really come about until the last couple hundred years, if anything, right?
Yeah, I would say so. I mean, there was a very big push with the Puritans to basically make the Bible as a scientific textbook. Now, I fully grant that the Christian ethos was that because God created the world and the universe, it was rational and meaningful, and it sparked scientific study. What made the West so advanced was this Christian understanding that the world is rational, and it birthed the modern scientific method. Not that they didn't have discoveries in other parts of the world, but the scientific method that we use today is a very Christian-oriented approach to understanding the world around us. But they never saw the Bible as a scientific textbook. And I think a lot of the creationists of today are trying to make it into one. And there are some interesting facts about, the earth being round, and I can't even think of any of the others. But yeah, it's not a scientific textbook. And I think that's where they make their folly.
I think there's a really good section about how to cure leprosy.
I mean, simple things like running water, like, let's be honest, right? Humans in Western Europe and Eastern Europe, they had still water, and the Bible does talk about if you're sick or if you have a wound, put your hand or your body in running water so the bacteria and whatever could be washed away. As simple as we might think today. In fact, that was a very controversial thing. So we have like the phrase, don't throw the baby out with the bathwater, because the whole family would bathe in the same water. It would get so nasty. You could have the baby in there. When you throw the water out, you didn't know there was somebody in the bath.
Oh, jeez.
So yeah, so I mean that's cute. I'm not gonna build a whole scientific literature off of running water in the Bible. Oh wow!
But I will.
But that's what the creationists would use.
I don't know, man. Throwing out the baby with the bathwater needs to be in all textbooks.
And it's an important lesson, right?
So what relevance do you think the creation story has for us today as Christians?
Ooh, there's a lot. Yeah. I mean, one of the things I think about is like before we talked about the two trees, I think it's interesting the significance of the order of which things were created. It was, plants and birds and then mammals, then humans, or things like that. Some of those orders are interesting. But I mean, all of it is a big setup to talking about the fall of man, right? That's the big theological point at the end of it, right? Is we chatted up a snake told us to eat this fruit, we did, and then all hell broke loose, right? And that's kind of like the pivotal point. And there's some big transition mentally, spiritually, physically, when we ate the fruit and before and after we ate the fruit, right? And so I think that is the huge theological connection. We're just talking about before that it's very similar to the Tower of Babel. It's actually very similar to Old Testament law and Christ fulfilling all of those things, right? They both have a message of being like a God and trying to have your eyes opened, right? But that in itself becomes a curse. And that happens in all three of those stories, right? The Paul talks a lot about how the law is a curse when you try to constantly keep it, but it also opens your eyes to the truth, and it also leads to death. Tower of Babel was the same thing, and the fruit of the knowledge of good and evil was the same thing as well. It was something we did apart from God that had our eyes open, that led to death, and it became a curse, right? And so those are all the big themes of all of those major points that all kind of relate to each other. And I think that's one of the more interesting things And you can go down like bigger, crazier routes talking about like what actually was the fruit. There's the mushroom theory, that Joe Rogan loves, is that we were innocent mammals up until we ate a lot of mushrooms, and that became us enlightened. Some people think the knowledge of good and evil was mushrooms. Some people think it's just more meat, or you could tie it to evolutionary theory when we made that leap from like ape and Cro-Magnon into actual Homo sapien. That has something to do with it, and that could just be an analogous tree. But there is some kind of big distinct thing that happened to our brains and happened to our spirituality as well before and after the fruit. And to me, that's the most interesting part of it, right?
Imagine tripping balls so hard you doom humanity.
Yeah.
Guess I could apply if you're the first man. Yeah. I suppose that. I don't know how to get into the genetics, though. That's an interesting premise.
Yeah. Adam and Eve's bogus journey.
Yeah.
Bruh.
Brooke, what do you think about the creation story having relevance for Christians today?
Yeah, I think it conveys principles. There are a lot of different takes on it. Like I was listening to a friend of mine recently talking about how, the breath of life, as CONK quite rightly alluded to, was kind of relying on the breath that God had given us, or relying on God as our source, versus the knowledge of good and evil, which is kind of relying on man's wisdom, or the wisdom of dust, right? So he did a whole parallel between living by the breath and living by the dust, as the carnal mind is the dust, spiritual mind. Yeah, it's an interesting take. I think that is the distinction. I think the distinction is, trying to get conveyed the idea that, we are a unionist creature. We are, made in the image and likeness of God, designed to be in union with him, be in compatibility with him, eventually to be like him, as we observe him and we have this fellowship and stuff like that. But we can make choices that kind of derail that along the way. And I think that's kind of the big picture of what the story is about. So the tree of knowledge and good and evil, everybody thinks that the knowledge was evil. No, God had the knowledge of good and evil even before. It doesn't necessarily make you a bad thing.
Yeah, and everything God created is good, and he created that tree.
Correct. Right? Correct.
He didn't create a sin ornament, right?
Yeah, exactly. So the knowledge of good and evil does not make you evil. A lot of people kind of fall into that trap. It's what you do with the knowledge. So basically it becomes a conscience, right? Everybody has a conscience. Our friend Terrence, who's all caught up on morality, that is the basis. And we think we can get that union with God by doing more good things and not doing the bad things. And that's the trap. That is the folly of thinking from the knowledge of good and evil. That's every religion on the face of the earth. You got to do good to get good, do good things, don't do bad things. That's the crux of the whole thing. It's the crux of the law. It's all of these things are reflected, but there's a whole other tree, which is the tree of life. And it has nothing to do with good and bad. It has nothing to do with your morality. It has everything to do with living in union with God, living in union with the source of life. So I think that, for me, that's the big takeaway. And I think that's what's echoed throughout the scripture. We see that contrast over and over again. And I'm not gonna, there are a lot of things I could say about evolution. There are a lot of problems with evolution. Let me say that. A lot of people don't know this, but there are a lot of people attempting to try and make evolution fit what we actually see today. In fact, in 2016, the Royal Society actually got together with this problem. They're basically saying Darwin doesn't work. We're not seeing it, and we're not seeing evidence for it. It does not explain the higher forms of construction and body plans. It does not explain the massive leaps that we see within the fossil record. It doesn't explain the Cambrian explosion. And it doesn't explain where the structures of the body and the eye and all these things come from. Darwinism is very good for explaining, environmental changes, what's happening in a micro scale, as I say, microevolution, adaptation, beaks and stuff like that. But there's no creativity in the theory of evolution. There is nothing that would take something from a base level beyond that. And what people don't know, there's like 6 different versions of evolution. As scientists are trying to figure out, like, how do they get around these gaps? And the biggest problem is the fact that DNA is structurally information. There is no natural process that we know of, apart from a human mind, or a mind, let's just say that creates anything that comes close to information. So where the evolutionists would fall short is on the beginnings, on the origins of the species and stuff like that. It's very good once everything is in place, you can see evolution acting upon it, but evolution unto itself cannot bring those things to pass. So we don't know. We don't know. Even the scientists.
It's hard to find a fossil record of when that bacteria turned into a different bacteria, right?
Correct. and the Cambrian explosion is a massive problem, right? So all of a sudden, a couple million years ago, boom, you get like 1,000 different species all appearing at once. Different body forms, different structures with compound eyes, like the trilobite has a fully formed eye. And Darwin admitted this in his writing. He's like, well, he just expected as time went on, they'll find the missing fossils. They'll find, different versions that occurred earlier. What they found is more and more species in the Cambrian explosion. Like it just got more and more diverse, and there's nothing before and they're not simple organisms. They're, carnivores and different types of fish and weird things that don't exist. And it just straight up, Darwin cannot account for that. That is one of the major problems. In fact, the scientists coming out of China and stuff like that, they say it's almost as if the tree is upside down. Like we started millions of years ago with more diverse species, and over time, 90% of those species have died, and we're now down to fewer and fewer. So it's almost
there was a mass extinction event we had, wasn't it? Was it Permian?
Yeah, exactly.
Permian, 90% of all species died.
Yeah. So it's almost as if he implied that what we expect to see like a common ancestor and it branches out into more and more, it's actually the reverse. There was a lot more species back in the day, and it's actually narrowing down. And we saw this Paleolithic era, destruction of, the dinosaurs, all of these different types of things. And scientists are admitting evolution cannot explain any of these things. And there are so many attempts, like expanded evolution, natural bioengineering theories, can't explain it. And
aliens.
Yeah. And I mean, like the intelligent people, right, who admit that the only source of information is a mind, they're not opposed to alien engineering. It doesn't have to be God. It can be aliens designed us.
Aliens of the gaps.
Yeah, aliens of the gaps, basically. That's what they're saying.
That's the most common thing I've heard from Cambrian explosion is that there had to be some form of other life tinkering, right? Yeah. There's no way at this moment that we could possibly explain it.
Yeah. It was, and they weren't simple blobs. They were fully, as I say, they were carnivore animals that were eating other animals. Like, how does that evolve? How does a carnivore evolve without other animals there to eat? Right? It's like there's a lot of problems with the theory, and especially when it comes to genetic information. I think that is probably the genetic information is something called irreducible complexity, which is basically, if a woodpecker doesn't have multiple things happening at once, as in it's got to have a strong beak, a strong head, all of the padding and stuff like that to be able to bore into the wood and all this. If it doesn't have all of those things at the same time, it's useless, right? If it has a strong beak and a soft skull, it'll crush its skull. If it has a strong skull and a soft beak, it will crush the beak. It would never pass on the genetic information. So it needs multiple things at the same time. Otherwise, why would natural selection select for all of these traits? Because none of them individually would be functional. Yeah. So the genetic information, irreducible complexity, and the massive gaps within the fossil record, Darwin's got lots of problems. Yeah.
I mean, that's common for almost all science too, right? Yeah. You eventually collect a pile of stuff that doesn't work, and you push it under a rug, and then eventually it's going to get too overbearing that you have to make a new theory, right? Yeah. That's just human nature.
I mean,
we're not good at explaining things. We're not
trying to connect Einstein and quantum mechanics. Relativity and quantum mechanics are still really far apart.
It's a fun topic. Yeah.
Yeah, not to get into that. Sorry, I'm not yawning about the topic, by the way, guys.
Yeah, fair enough.
I'm yawning because I'm tired. But Okay, so we talked about that and that.
I mean, what are your views? I mean, let's hit the evolution side. I just gave my spiel. So we talked a bit about the garden. Maybe you guys want to share your thoughts on evolution.
I think it holds a lot. It explains a lot, but you bringing up some of those questions is definitely valid. I think, like looking at the record and looking at what we know about like the different species that came before us, and evolution of man and stuff. Like, it's like just because there's gaps, it doesn't mean like evolution is totally totally bullshit and we're all it's all creation, because I think that's kind of like the modern argument is like the creationist and evolutionist argument is either it's creation or it's evolution. There's nothing in between. And then when you suggest things like intelligent design or some sort of influence outside of the normal progression of evolution, the perception is, oh, that's heresy. Heresy. You can't just say that. Yeah. Implosive hypeness. Anyways, just seeing the chat there. But I tend to see like, their evolution makes sense for what we have, but it obviously is not covering all the bases. Now, where like you were saying with the gaps and such, and even with what CONK was talking about with like Joe Rogan likes talking about mushrooms. I actually kind of tend to like some of those theories regarding like some of those leaps are because of, I guess mushrooms wouldn't technically be like evolution itself, would it? If humanity, like if man is where we are right now because of, we made giant leaps along the way because of mushrooms. No problem with that.
Cool.
Because that would make more sense of like how we basically grew our brains so big and got as smart as we are along the way.
I mean,
otherwise,
it's a nice theory.
What's that?
It wouldn't affect the brain to grow it, which is the problem why the mushroom hypothesis is basically thrown out. There's no reason that the psilocybin will get into the DNA to affect the size of the brain. It passes through your body in like 2 hours or 6 hours.
Well, maybe psilocybin with lots of meat.
Right. Well, we definitely.
What if you have sex while eating a mushroom?
That's a lot of fun, by the way. Baby. That's a lot of fun, by the way. But yeah, I mean the meat is probably the biggest hypothesis because you needed the fat. The brain is mostly made of fat. So when we probably switch from eating plants and vegetation and stuff like that, like primates today, to a carnivore style diet, more meat, more fat, we had a bigger brain. And
sprinkle some psilocybin on that bacon.
Yeah, as I say, that's possible. Yeah, I mean, but there's no reason the psilocybin will affect the brain. It doesn't get into the genetics. The fat of the diet, can build up the brain though. So that could be the difference.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I've always heard it's necessarily like, so we've always eaten meat, but it was like a secondary food. And then once we got good at hunting, it became a primary food and all of the benefits of that. And that's when you see over time, we start getting taller and we start getting smarter, bigger brains, everything like that, because we have such dense macronutrient from eating mammoth steaks instead of, ants and seeds all day. Right.
Man, could you imagine a mammoth steak?
Dude, I want one.
Man. It is Valentine's Day, so.
Oh, it is. Happy Valentine's Day, everyone. We didn't even talk about that.
Yeah. I've got my bag of V's. I
was gonna say, talking about creation. Valentine's Day.
Is that a myth?
Start my own creation story.
But yeah, like I tend to see like it makes the most sense for evolution over creation, because is there really other theories besides, well, not even theories, just other explanations besides creation and evolution?
Yeah, transpermia is one. outside engineering.
Well, transpermia is kind of within. It's kind of like in addition to evolution, isn't it? Like it's not saying the origin of life is just here. It's saying is transpermia would explain like how something got here. Like
Right,
the
right.
seeds of
So
life got here somewhere from somewhere
right, but
else.
so yeah, that is another theory outside of evolution and creation, like divine creation. So intelligent design is one. Of course, you could include the alien hypothesis. It doesn't have to be God. There's there's spontaneous creation. That's like a quantum thought that things from other realities, other universes, kind of just seeped into this one. Oh yeah, there are a couple of them. I don't know all of them. It's not an area I'm an expert in, right, by any means.
So what you're trying to say is that fifth dimensional baby vampires came in and created us
they're
from another
already here.
dimension.
That's right.
Creation happened at Bohemian Grove.
Yeah.
This is when Moloch took all the kids.
Yeah, I'm just eating my V's here, you know. Yeah. Don't know if they could see that.
I feel like they would literally taste like that, and I don't want them. I'd rather
They're
have
sweet and
chocolate. Thank
delicious.
you.
So, anyways, with all of that said, no.
I mean, CONK has to give his view on evolution.
Yeah,
CONK. I put it in the chat earlier, but I'm kind of like who knows who cares is my opinion on most things, especially when it comes to debating history. Like, till you build a time machine, you're just going to be yelling at each other for no reason, right? And so, I mean, I usually just adopt whatever they believe and then just go from there, because I don't even think it's worth the argument. You know what I mean? It'll probably change in 100 years or whatever. Maybe when Elon Musk sends me to Mars, maybe we'll start creating some new theories of some bacteria in their ice or whatever. But I mean, it's a scientific theory, and those get changed rapidly. So
yeah.
saying we got it is probably the dumbest thing ever.
What if? Here's a thought, because you were saying, Brooke, like with the sudden leaps in evolution are kind of where evolution like tends to fall short. It doesn't really explain these giant leaps.
Mhm.
Do you think, given enough time, where we are can happen? Like if it was completely just on our own, if a few bacteria got together.
I mean, what ability does time have to create anything?
Basically, more time to become more complex.
What we're seeing, like this is an argument a lot of people have come up with, and they said, well, and this was Darwin's theory as well, that given enough time, we'll fill in the gaps and we'll figure things out, right?
No, not that we would fill in the gaps. I'm saying, given enough time.
Mm-hmm.
You're shaking a watch in a bag, right? Is that what you're talking about?
No. If because you're saying there's these leaps that they can't explain. So instead of like in the leap being like within a short amount of time, what if you had a longer amount of time? So it's not leaps, but it's just very, very gradual.
Well, that's not what we see.
No. I know that's not what we see, but
I mean, in theory, if so, the instance of the Cambrian explosion happened all within the space of about 5 million years. 5 million years to evolve, hundreds of variations.
Let's say if it was 100 million years.
It would need to have that much variation. It would have to be, according to the theory, a couple billion years. Okay. Or yeah, at least 100 million. But this is the problem. That's not what we see.
No, I get that. So what I'm getting at is, because we're talking about transpermia, and the universe is obviously way older than the Earth is.
Sure.
So it could stand to reason that maybe something evolved, or some level of like the leap, or something like basically incorporating like just the time scales that the universe is operating under. Something from somewhere else came here that maybe did evolve over there over a longer period of time. That kind of helped us move our evolution along.
Sure.
Whether
that's possible. I mean, that makes more sense than nucleogenesis, which was like life just spontaneously came into existence. That definitely makes more sense.
If the primordial pool, they got a lightning to strike it, and humanity.
Even primordial soup, bro. Come on.
Yeah, I mean, it's no atom by itself wants to create life, right? It's like no atoms don't come together and just decide, oh yeah, let's pop out a poodle. There is no process by which we can, without intervention, put a bunch of dead objects together and create life, right? No more than I can take all the parts of a cell individually, put them in a test tube, and wait 1 million years to see them assemble. That just does not happen. In fact, the reverse happens. There's entropy. So when these atoms don't, first of all, want to come together, they have their own magnetic poles that kind of want to push them apart. We have super colliders that basically try to overcome a lot of these problems. But there's nothing. There is no mechanism by which we can take inanimate, dead objects and incorporate them into the life experience without processing it through our body, through something.
Mm.
And that's why evolution has nothing to say about the origins of life. Evolution only has play after all of these things are in place. They can explain the micro changes within the system that exists already.
Which is pretty cool as it is.
Sure. No, it's a fabulous process. It's an amazing understanding. Darwin wasn't the first to come up with it, but he definitely pushed on natural selection. But even natural selection is an innocuous term, because how does nature select for something? And you have the problem, like how does nature impact the genetic information to say lock in this sequence of DNA? Like this sequence of DNA works. What force in nature is going to communicate to the DNA to say, hold on to this and don't change it?
No, my understanding of that natural selection is basically whichever, like for every generation of whatever species you're talking about, there's always going to be small bits of mutations.
Yes.
And the one guy that's going to get a slight mutation this direction versus the other direction is going to survive better, so he's going to reproduce more.
Why?
And the guy who,
Why?
Because
what makes him special why? Why is he going to survive more than everybody else if he's just got a micro mutation? What makes him survivable?
If you look at because there's little mutations that we have. Now, granted, with humanity, with all the technology we have in place, mutations don't play as big of a role in our evolution. But with animals, like
it doesn't work. Here's the problem. Even if I was a microcell organism and suddenly I grow a horn, let's just say, whatever, right? If I mate with another organism that doesn't have the horn, there's only a 50-50 chance that horn property is going to be passed off to the offspring. And then if there's no other horns about, that feature is actually going to be bred out because there's nobody else to kind of reinforce.
Or even if 1% of you started growing that horn.
Right. Now this is where, again, they have to adapt the theory of evolution. So extended evolution basically says that property of the horn cannot be a micro change mutation. It has to be a mass mutation all at once on multiple beings that have the same mutation that suddenly come together to select for it. So now you start to see that the theory is no longer small micro changes. It has to be population-wide changes spontaneously all at the same time. That's starting to border on the absurd, to say that, yeah, all of a sudden, all of them, come up with the same thing at the same time. So this is again the problem why evolution it can't explain that. It can't explain that.
Like you can't really find early fossils of something with like a half deformed, unusable eye, and hopefully over time it becomes a working eye, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
You would have to create the whole eye in one shot, which is a lot of steps. It's not one mutation step.
Correct.
Yeah.
And because if the eye didn't fully work, it would, according to natural selection, it would select against it. It's a useless, whatever, appendage. It needs the whole thing to come together. So this is irreducible complexity. Otherwise, it's not good. And even if you did have it, if you were the only thing and you had a compound eye and no other version of your species has that compound eye, it will be bred out. Because the next generation, you have a 50-50 chance it'll get it. Then the next one, you got a 50-50 chance and so on. and it's just diminishing returns. So there are a lot of problems with the theory. It does explain micro changes. We could breed different types of dogs. We could do all different types of things, but all of that stuff has to be in place before. It cannot spontaneously come together.
Yeah. Oh, you know what I just realized? Boom. There we go.
What's up?
I just had the 10K rum logo.
Oh, the 10K rum logo is.
Get out of here.
Get it, Conk. Get it.
Okay.
I'm
trying to think about what else.
With you guys in the US, did you ever encounter that debate in schools about evolution and intelligent design? And because you were around the time that was a hot topic, wasn't it?
Well,
intelligent design was introduced in a Christian group I was in that was through school. So I used to be part of something called the Fellowship of Christian Athletes, all fancy and stuff.
yeah, my uncle used to work there.
It is what it really is. It's Christian kids, interdenominational like organization that has just kids in high school that are in sports that want to get together and have like a Christian group. And so we watched a movie on intelligent design. It was the Ben Stein.
Right.
Expelled.
Yeah. Okay, I remember that movie.
Yeah.
Watched that, and it was interesting. Like, there's a lot of like good points on that. Like, because he wasn't completely like dismissing evolution as a concept. He's just saying is like there are these processes that are definitely happening. We've observed that, but when you have these big leaps or these sudden changes in species, and he even said like when scientists have tried to question that or bring about information that could point to some sense of intelligent design, they all kind of get shut down. They get fired. They're forced to resign. They sort of blacklisted to never teach again and stuff like that. Funding revoked for whatever experiments they're working on, stuff like that.
What about you, Conk? You had any exposure to that in the schools out there?
Well, I've been to secular schools and I've been to Christianese schools, and yeah. It's where they're all in on the culture and the blah, blah, blah. But I mean, they don't really debate it. They just pick one and go with it kind of thing. They don't even really talk about the alternatives either way. So, in secular schools, they just talk about evolution. And in Christian schools, they talk just about intelligent design. And they don't really debate. You're just supposed to adopt the view of your school, right? And like, nobody really like raised their hand and asked questions about either side either. They just inherently said, okay, right? And yeah, I mean, that's good and bad. It's bad because it's good to question everything, but it's also good because it's a sorry, my phone's going on. It's a dumb argument. So same people, the brain cells it takes to argue things that nobody has evidence for. You know what I mean? And it is, I mean, at the end of the day, it is pretty ideological both ways, right? You're going to say one side and the other side is just stupid. You know what I mean? But I mean, at the end of the day, yeah, we have fossil records of some things and we don't have fossil records of other things. And why can't we just learn to be? That's okay. Come on, guys. It's not worth the painstaking God versus atheist, evolution versus intelligent design debates. To me, those are the most boring, unfruitful things that have ever existed. So, yeah. It reminds me a lot of that. What was that guy that came and crashed? I think it was one of the ones that Brooke was gone. What was his name? Like Duncan Atheist. Do you remember him?
Oh, right.
Yeah. And he was like going on this big tirade of like trying to feel intellectually superior about why he can systematically prove that atheists are wrong and blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, it's the dumbest shit ever. Like, it's both boring and fruitless. But some people dedicate their whole lives to one of those sides of the debate, and I just think it's dumb. Like, who cares? at the end of the day.
Well, I care.
I'm sorry for your loss. You should care less.
Yeah, I mean, I thought we probably have a lot more to really get into on this. Now, what about other creation stories? It's kind of going back to creation a little bit.
So the
Is there
story
any-
of Idrisel and
Yeah, I mean, do you think there's any relevance from other stories of creation? You know,
the Norse creation story is very, very difficult to see a deeper meaning. Because there is Idrisel, which is the tree of life, and there's
Right.
one giant. Can't remember the name of it, and they basically kill the giant to create the man and create the world, and they basically make the world out of him. That's one creation story. I don't think there was a message, to be honest. I think it was just violence.
Yeah, I mean, you can always see that there's like common similarities even between the biblical creation story and other creation stories. I mean, it's always the divine creating the human, right? There's not a whole lot of creation stories that involve, oh, slowly over time we became shrews and hid in the world and then became apes and then became humans. There's no creation story ever in any humanity really talks about that, right? It's always some kind of divine specific point in time that modern humans today existed, at least, right? There are some, I can't think of any of the names at the top point, but I have heard some that talk about like Cro-Magnon and like pre-human humans before we get to our human. But like that point in time, that pivotal time between what makes us human from non-human, is always some kind of weird, divinely interjected situation. And I always think that's really interesting because when you talk about, the human brain and consciousness versus like a dog or a monkey or a bug, right? There is some kind of weird definitive difference, right? Otherwise, we would see dogs and cats out here with guns and civilizations too, Cat gun.
Haven't scientists kind of identified that like certain, was it chimps maybe? Certain chimps or apes are starting to show signs of having like they're like approaching the Bronze Age or something.
I mean, the chimps are exhibiting some type of collective behavior, and they're learning to use tools. So we'd see like they domesticate dogs. They know if they just like grab a puppy and they keep it kind of there, the puppy will kind of stick around.
But I mean, yeah, I've heard them saying like,
yeah, but they're stealing our idea.
I know.
Train your own
But I
domestication.
mean, scientists I've read some articles about how like they said they're approaching like some sense of a Bronze Age, which they're kind of saying like that could mean like in a couple thousand years or a few thousand years, they'll basically be pretty close to where we are now.
Possibly. The problem is that their language section of the brain is so small compared to ours. It would be very hard to do those kind of collectivist things.
Gotta give them mushrooms, man.
Yeah.
I'm sure there's a scientist somewhere that's pumping up some chips with mushrooms. Trust me.
Yeah, remember the dolphin LSD studies? Those are awesome to read about. That's one of my favorite things of all time. They would like jack off and sexually stimulate dolphins while giving them LSD, trying to communicate with them in the 70s. Yeah, the American government. Yeah.
What?
Yeah. I can't remember what paper that was.
But yeah, that really happened. We were trying to communicate with dolphins because we knew they were the most, they were the smartest non-human species on Earth, right? Like aqua mammals, so like dolphins, whales, orcas.
Yeah, dolphins have bigger brains than us, which is interesting too.
Yeah. And like the part of your brain where there's like consciousness or whatever, it's actually bigger in like sperm whales than it is in humans. So there's a lot of hypothesis theories that like if dolphins did have like opposable thumbs and the same mobility we did, that there would be like underwater cities and shit that they could build.
Or if they just had, if they had a language center, we could probably communicate with them a lot more.
Yeah. Well, they do have a language. It's just something we can't comprehend. That was the point of those LSD studies, was trying to bridge that gap. It's kind of like those gorillas. They teach sign language, but it doesn't really go anywhere. They're trying to find a version of that for dolphins. but it involved a lot of sex and drugs.
There's monkeys that have been taught sign language and actually been able to communicate quite somewhat effectively, at least.
No, but that got debunked a lot too. That's very controversial because they can memorize patterns, just like there's this whole thing where they taught a horse to do math, but they didn't. It was just able to memorize patterns. It's not actually consciously understanding 5 + 3 is 8, right?
Because there was that excuse me, wasn't there that one ape that was like friends with Robin Williams or whatever?
Coco the gorilla, yeah. It's one of the sign language gorillas, but they can't like create new thoughts. They can really just repeat behaviors, just like a dog. They can just do it better, if that makes sense.
Yeah, because it was saying like Coco like asked where he was, and then they were like, "He's not. He's dead." And then she was like, "Oh, I'm sad."
Yeah,
that was it. Like,
yeah. But that's not really cognitive behavior, right? That's also repeated patterns of things.
So basically, you're making animals to operate more like calculators and computers rather than having any real individual thoughts. Like the dogs that can do math, like they'll say, "Okay, what's this times this?" And then the dog barks the answer. They're really just doing a pattern. They're not sitting there actually thinking per se.
Yeah, exactly. Or like, those people that teach a dog, go get me a beer from the fridge, right? There's a bunch of videos of that. Or you could train a dog. When I was in middle school, we didn't have a yard for a dog to go to the bathroom, so we had to walk them every time. And we had a dog trainer come and teach them to ring a bell on the door, like an actual manual cowbell, whenever they had to go to the bathroom to tell us. They're not cognitively thinking about this. It's just, oh, I have to pee. I'm supposed to ring the bell.
Yeah.
Right? That doesn't go much farther than that. And monkeys don't really go much farther than that either. It just looks cooler because they have hands. It's essentially what it is.
Right. Trying to think of like.
I would say there's one other creation myth. I was actually looking for it. I can't remember the details. So people, please fact check me on this. But it's the Babylonian myth of Nibiru, which is the 9th planet in our galaxy, in our solar system. Sorry,
the galaxy.
Yeah, sorry, in our
There's
solar
only
system.
9 planets.
Well, the whole thing. It was Planet X. I don't know if you've heard about this, but it has like
it's past Pluto, right?
Yeah, it's past Pluto. It has like a 10,000 year rotation or something like that. So it only gets close to Earth like every 10,000 years or whatever the case might be. And this is actually, it's the Babylonian text is very obscure, but it sounds like Nibiru showed up in the sky and the gods came down to Earth, found a bunch of apes, modified them to do their bidding, and basically ruled the Earth for like a couple thousand years as the planet started to drift off too far. And they created a line of kings to rule over them while they were away, and then they returned to their planet as the rotation went too far for them for their ships. And that actually is one of the theories of the origins of man. Ironically, the science actually supports that very nicely.
Nice.
Yeah, I'm sure I'm mixing in some late night History Channel UFOs, ancient aliens shit in there. Yeah. So I may have the story wrong, but it was something like that. I don't have it exactly right, but
yeah, it does remind me of my favorite creation story of all time. Zeno throwing planes and bombs into volcanoes
to have spiritual children. Yeah. For those who don't know, that's Scientology, right?
I was like,
we're not supposed to know it. Don't talk about it. We're not level 3. We haven't paid our dues.
South Park did a fantastic rendition, I think, of that.
What about the Mormon creations?
Oh, that's
because that's a cycle. It's happened a billion times.
God had Jesus and Lucifer, who were brothers as kids.
Yes, and lots of spiritual children.
Yeah, God came down and had sex with Mary to give birth to Jesus. And then there's the whole thing about the angels and humans and some somewhat racist stuff. Like they basically said like, and this is not me, just what I saw. There was that one video I've seen.
Yeah.
Where it talks about what do we got here? Oh, what was it? Yeah, basically like the fallen angels. So there's some things kind of cross into mainstream Christian theology. So like where the devil came about, like the devil took a third of the angels and stuff. They say like Lucifer took a third of the angels, and those turned into like black people. And I was like, oh no.
No. There was a debate between Jesus and Lucifer on who was going to be the savior. God chose Jesus, and Lucifer was upset and he rebelled, and that's where the demons and other things came from. That was his 1/3.
Oh, you froze.
Uh-oh.
It's been swell.
Oh no, Brooke.
Lost everybody. Hello? Testing 1, 2, 3.
Okay, now you're there. We missed about 20 seconds.
That's very strange. Right, so there was the rebellion.
Yeah.
And those spirit children became the demons and other things. Jesus had his crew, and basically they became the Aryan race, the whites with blue eyes, blonde hair. And the bunch in the middle who didn't pick a side, they were born with the curse of dark skin. So that's not me saying it. This is
the Mormons.
This is the Mormons, the Mormon faith, right? So
and then,
that's right. It was the ones that didn't choose. I thought it was the ones that were the
yeah. And black people were allowed to be Mormons, but they weren't allowed to be pastors or priests or hold any office. And they got sued, and then magically God inspired the prophet leader that now black people are okay right after they got sued. And so that was pretty convenient. Good timing, God. Good timing.
Yes. I've actually met black Mormons, and I'm kind of in the back of my mind, I'm wondering, like, why are you here? Like, why do you not know? Yeah. I mean, I guess people want to believe. So what can I say? Yeah.
Amen. And also the interesting thing about Mormonism is that Adam and God are the same person. In a lot of theories, and and Adam was just a really good Mormon on a different planet, a different billion years ago, and he was able to attain godhood from doing good things. Right. And therefore, if he was a good enough Mormon, you get to go to super heaven and you become God, and you get to start your own creation story, right? And so all of this current man-made stuff we're doing right now is all based on an old Mormon from a different planet, galaxy far, far away, that was a good enough Mormon to make Earth and start our creation story.
So really, Star Wars is just another Mormon god's creation.
Yeah, pretty much, yeah. Luke Skywalker was the best Mormon around. Yeah,
in a galaxy far, far away.
Yep.
That is a very bizarre creation story. Are there any others? I know the Muslims. It was Allah made us out of the blood. Out of blood, and from that, I don't want to butcher it, but I think that was kind of the beginning. Instead of the dust of the earth, He formed us out of the blood. So again, I haven't read that story in a long time. I don't think the Buddhists really have one. Well, depending on which sect of Buddhism, because they kind of more concerned about the here and now, kind of like you, CONK. Yeah. Like it doesn't matter. It's like we're here and now. Let's just deal with the here and now.
Yeah, the divine winging it.
Yeah, it's very zen. It's very hip with I don't know any others. I just don't know any others.
Well, there's always like the Hindu one where all the Hindu one is kind of similar to like, it reminds me a lot of like Roman and Greek gods where they're all always fighting with each other all the time and betraying each other and messing with the alliances and things like that. And in one of those fights, somehow our creation was made. What is it? Like Brahma's the big god that makes everything, I think.
Yeah. I mean, the Roman mythology as well. There was one of the gods that created man to serve the gods of Olympus. And, Zeus was very pleased with it. I can't remember which god it was, but same thing, but created us out of the dust. And, when they started to exhibit free will, Zeus kind of got a little dicey. He's like, I'm not sure I like these people so much.
And that's when he was like, I got to have sex with a bunch of these people.
Well, he did that anyway. So who else was a I don't know the Egyptian creation story. That would be interesting to look up.
I know a couple random tidbits about not necessarily the creation story, but their Horus was really interesting. Where
Anubis and Horus is another one, and I don't know the creation myth though. I don't know what their story was.
It's really just the Goa'uld from Stargate.
Big difference.
Much.
I mean, we're gonna have our own creation story soon with artificial intelligence. I think that'll be fun. Are they going to tell their creation stories? The great Elon Musk and Bill Gates were our creators, and maybe they'll write their own little AI
or
Bible.
even just if for some reason, like the story of how they're going to explain creation. If somehow, let's say in the future, Earth became uninhabitable and humans were on Mars.
Mm-hmm.
But somehow, like, the destruction was halted enough that thousands, maybe tens of thousands of years passed on Mars. How would they explain, like, that? How did we get here? Well, I don't know.
That is one of the theories. I don't know who said this, but the idea was that Mars was a habitable planet, and we originally came from Mars. And because of whatever pollution and other things, we destroyed the planet, and we sent 2 survivors to Earth. And started the whole process again.
Well, what if we came from Venus?
Mars. Well, Venus is a little too hot for us to live on. We can live on Mars. I think Venus is beyond the Goldilocks zone. I can't remember where that was, but I know there's been a movie about that as well. I mean, you know,
I know the Twilight Zone did an episode about these 2 people that came from some other planet. They were humans, and then they were named Adam and Eve. Like some space expedition to save humanity like went wrong, and ended up here. Anyways,
well, the ship went off course and the crash landed here. It wasn't meant for here
because there was something out on the wing, right?
Exactly.
Yeah, famous Twilight Zone episode.
Did we drop? Oh, we got to drop the link.
Yeah. Put the link in the chat. I don't know how much more we could cover on creation stories.
We're just in. Yeah, we're kind of. I thought this would go a little longer, but yeah, we really just had like a good hour.
I mean, I could rant about the Garden of Eden all day. I just don't know how down we want to go into that rabbit hole.
That might be a whole episode in itself.
The rabbit hole theory.
Yeah. We were born out of a rabbit hole. We've never gotten out.
Yeah, we're still in it, man.
Yeah. Word.
So everyone, I just dropped the link in the chat there. If anyone wants to come on, add a little comment, a little question, add to the discussion. Debate why creation. I don't even know.
I mean, then you do have the I don't know what you call it. Where what was the white race was created by Naboo or one of these things.
Naboo.
This is like the Afrocentric creation story.
Yeah,
I can't remember the details, but
Kang's theory.
We was Kang's theory.
So there's a theory that basically like, huh?
We're gonna get canceled.
Well, there's a theory that basically the Africans were these literally big-brained aliens that created the white man as like some subservient race or something.
Yes,
because melanin is like a neurotransmitter that makes them really smart. So they have a lot of melanin, therefore they're smarter than us. And we're, since we don't have as much melanin, we're the dumb, more subservient race. And yeah,
I'm looking for the name of.
It can't be some sort of mainstream theory because
it's not well accepted. But it is a creation story. We talk
like I'm more keen to believe in Wakanda than this.
Yeah, get that vibranium, bro.
Because the thing behind Wakanda is basically they had this giant vibranium meteorite crashed into Africa, and then they used that metal to basically become the civilization they are today.
Yes.
Mm-hmm. They got high tech faster than us,
which makes no sense
because they got alien upgrades.
which makes no sense. They would suffer from the Dutch disease or the resource paradox. And we've seen it. We've seen where civilizations they've been sitting on massive resources, but without innovation to come in from usually outside sources, they don't develop. So it's a great myth, but it's it's not real. And when you have one resource like Venezuela, you see how that turned out.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I'm looking for this story, man. I probably have to go and watch that video of Tariq Nasheed and see, where the white people came from. If anybody knows, put it in the chat. I'd love. I can't remember where that story came from. Yaqub, here it is. It's part of the Nation of Islam. So this is not like mainstream Islam, but they believe that Yaqub was a black scientist that lived 6,000 years ago and began the creation of the white race or the white people. So he said to done this through selective breeding and the grafting in while living on the Isle of Patmos. So they believe that Jacob was the biblical Jacob. And he basically created us for servitude.
Oh boy,
oh, that's good.
How
Do you think
fun.
they would have put that in the Bible? That's probably an important plot point.
I'll put it in the chat if anybody's interested to read that
geez.
story. Yeah,
Oh boy.
it's crazy. How are we doing, man? Any links coming in? Anybody's jumping on?
No one's coming in.
How
All right, cool. Anything else we could probably say about the creation story?
It's Adam and Eve. Not Adam and Steve. Lilith? No, that's a little.
Yeah,
obscure.
I mean, alternative civilizations. Like I was talking about near the beginning, I was talking about like who did Cain and Abel procreate with, and what other civilizations was Cain afraid of if there was only 4 people on Earth, right? And that's an interesting plot hole, right? Of what other people are they referencing? Are there other people? Was it the Cro-Magnons that weren't quite Homo sapien yet, or something like that? Or was it, the Bible's only caring about this family, but there was other families too,
Or
same thing with Noah's Ark. Yeah, Noah's family too. Like, how did that work?
Well, that was incest. That was,
Yeah, that's actually pretty explicit in Genesis. Yeah,
that was it.
Yeah.
I mean, the Adam and Eve, they do say that, yes, Adam and Eve had other children beyond Seth, but at the time of the story, you're right. They don't mention that. That's kind of an add-on at the end. So a lot of people explain it that way. And honestly, I don't know. I don't care.
I mean, man, with childbirth supposing to be painful and all this stuff, after the fall of man, and just expecting Adam and Eve to have just dozens of kids, no problem.
Hundreds, probably. They did it for thousands of years, almost 1,000 years.
Yeah.
Like, how does that work?
Well, I mean, have you guys ever heard canopy theory? That's one of my favorite things to talk
about. Canopy theory?
So when God said he separated the waters, there's a sky ocean and a earth ocean.
Oh, right.
Water canopy, and that's why everyone could live so long, because it filtered out so much UV rays. And then when Noah's flood came, the canopy fell. And that's why it flooded the earth, because you just created a second ocean on top of the main ocean. Yeah.
I did hear this. And now, in fact, one of the creationists that pushed that thing, they said, well, yeah, they did find water in space, like in the orbit and stuff like that. And there's kind of a question as to where that came from. I remember
really
that
big
theory.
Splash. Really big.
Yeah.
The water droplet just went into orbit. Yeah.
Yeah.
The ultimate cannonball. Yeah.
All right. Well, we still don't have anyone coming on yet. So
what's wrong with you guys? You guys afraid?
Yeah.
Bunch of cowards.
Yeah. I mean, canopy theory is also interesting too, because they talk about how dense the air would be in between the two blankets. And that's how like dinosaurs were able to breathe, kind of thing, is because they had such thick air that our current air is too thin for something that size of an animal on Earth.
Oxygen, basically.
A land animal. Yeah. It would be, the air and the oxygen would be so dense that you could make animals that sized. And, you look at old, like, dragonflies and beetles, and they were the size of humans. and
were
crazy
big.
crap like that. And they,
Yeah.
a lot of people were saying that's only possible if you have super dense air for them to breathe.
It's probably even just not even just density, but just a higher oxygen content. Because we're only like our air is only like just below
30.
20% oxygen.
Yeah, somewhere around there. It's mostly nitrogen
Yeah.
oxide. Yeah, plus inert gases.
Yeah.
So it's like if we had 5 times the oxygen we have now, how would we grow as humans?
Yeah, interesting theory.
Yeah, we would probably all be Goliath sized. Not quite, because he was after the flood, but
there are some interesting, I mean, I don't buy into a literal creationist myth, but there are some theories that are interesting. They're fun to look at. The canopy one, I remember that one. And that was like the cause of the flood and stuff like that. I don't remember any others, but if anybody remembers any of those funny myths, any of those things, yeah, just let us know.
Awesome. Well, wrap it up, I guess, if nobody wants to talk to us.
Yeah.
Friends to play with.
Everybody's, they've got their loved ones. They ain't got no time for us on Valentine's Day. No love for the boys.
Boys cast. Have you guys seen that? It's actually really funny. Ryan Long, the comedian, he's blown up recently. And he has a podcast called Boys Cast. It's a podcast just for the boys.
Sweet.
And he mostly just shits on women and politics and stuff. It's pretty funny.
Final thoughts, guys. CONK.
Popcorn to Brooke. I'll have to think of one.
I think a lot of people are not really looking into the creation story. I think there's a lot of rich history and a lot of rich information in it. Also, I don't think people are really taking an interest in evolution. I mean, everybody's got their life to live, but we tend to say a lot of things about evolution that are just not true. We think like it's the perfect theory. We think, it's unquestionable. It's explained everything. And no, guys, there's a lot that we don't understand in terms of science and otherwise. There's a lot of gaps, and don't be afraid to ask these types of questions. I think we may do a full episode maybe on the garden. I know, CONK, that's kind of what you were hoping to do. So I thought that might be coming next week. Are we doing?
Yeah, I think I'm on next week.
I think
we could probably do that. Yeah. I like going through all the different things because there's like an Orthodox explanation, a Catholic explanation, Protestant explanation, and all the things in between. There's like 20 different explanations for the 2 trees in the Garden of Eden. And so I think it'd be fun to hash those out.
Yeah. I mean, if you got a resource, you could send it to the 2 of us so we could also kind of take a look at it and be prepped. I don't know all. I didn't know that many, so that would be good.
Yeah, it's a very short story, so that means you need a lot of exploration.
Yeah. It's kind of making like a 2-hour movie out of Noah, which is like 16 passages in the Bible kind of thing. You got to really dig into that. So, I look forward to that. And as I say, the evolution thing, I tend to look at. I'm not an expert on it. I think people would be surprised about how much the mainstream science is actually questioning the theory of evolution now. A lot of people just think it's kind of settled science, and it's really not. And I mean, there've been articles that came out in National Geographic and other places basically showing there are a lot of problems. And it's good to know. It's good to know, just don't blindly fall into everything. So that would be my final thoughts.
Awesome. Yeah, I would also say that's pretty similar too. I think there's a lot of questioning the Big Bang now too. Yeah. Well, that's the 2 things you hear when you're a kid is Big Bang and evolution. We're done. All right, move on. Right. But it's actually not that set in stone even for secular scientists, right? I would say my final thought is kind of similar to what Brooke said. It's like, even though they are short stories and you don't have to take them super literally, like 7 days or blah, 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 or whatever. I mean, there's still a lot there. Like the beginning of a story is usually an important part of the story. Like you don't just read Harry Potter where he's already a master wizard, like junior or senior at Hogwarts, right? You kind of want that background info, right? That origin story of what's going on. So yeah, I think it's always good to deep dive into those, look into the different interpretations of it, see what you can glean out of it. Just because it's short doesn't mean it sucks.
One caveat on that story about how you want to see the growth. There is actually a anime series that turns that entire thing on its head, which is called One Punch Man. I don't know if you've seen that.
Oh yeah, yeah. His origin story is like 2 minutes.
Yeah, and you don't really get into it. Really, he's kind of full powered right from the beginning.
Mhm.
So
apparently later in the show, because the creator is still making more.
yeah, the mangas are still coming out.
Yeah, it's still coming out. Apparently, they start to show hints of where he really came from.
Yeah,
how did he actually get the power?
100 push-ups, bro.
Yeah.
I just finished watching season 2, so
yeah. But I mean, that whole show is supposed to be like satire, isn't it?
It's making fun of like Dragon Ball Z and all these things where the hero has to get stronger. He's already
maxed out.
Yeah. So it is a good show.
But my final thoughts.
Yes.
I think I'm kind of a little bit more like oh, this is interesting to talk about. Huh?
I'm out of V's, so.
Oh no.
That's rough.
It's all very interesting like to talk about, but when it comes to like day-to-day stuff, like I personally don't see much benefit to really digging into creation or even evolution to a degree, unless there was some like major breakthrough that like, kind of like, let's say like the last time I really got excited about like a scientific breakthrough I thought was really cool was the gravitational waves back in 2016.
Ooh.
Everyone was getting all excited because we confirmed that part of Einstein's theories. But then other than that, it's like you hear about a little here, a little there, and really just most of the stuff are just what affects you every day, whether it's new laws, presidents, stuff like that. But then when it comes to like these theories and stuff, it's probably going to be the only time I'm going to talk about it for a while. Unless they found something crazy, like maybe they found a fossil where a human got to meet a dinosaur. That'd be kind of cool. But yeah. So
yeah, there's already claims of that. Apparently, there's a footprint inside of a dinosaur footprint, a human footprint.
Creation Evidence Museum.
Yeah. Whether that's relevant or not, I don't know. But apparently, it exists somewhere.
But,
a lot of Bigfoot footprints too. A lot of.
There you go. I hear Santa's real too.
Yeah.
Anyways, so we're gonna be on CONK's channel next week.
Yeah, I think so.
Bless.
Talking about the garden.
Yeah, well, I think we'll probably deep dive into the two tree theories of all of the different denominations and see if we can find one that's relevant.
See if there's anything else growing in the garden.
Ooh,
spicy.
That'd be funny.
Man, this garden is dank.
Anyways, but yeah, of course, check everyone's links below. Subscribe to our channels. Check out Brooke and myself on the 10K Run podcast on Tuesday. Anything you got going on, CONK?
No.
Okay.
It's all the same. It's all
right. So then, yeah. So thanks for joining us, our amazing panel. And of course, everyone joining us in the chat as well. We will see everyone next week.
Papa bless.